The Chicago Bulls dominated the 90s with 6 rings in 8 years. But in 1998, as Michael Jordan stood at the podium after winning his final ring, he said something prophetic.
We're entitled to defend what we have until we lose it. If we lose it, then you look at it and you say, okay, let's change. Let's just go through a rebuilding. No one's guaranteeing rebuilding is going to be 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years. Cubs have been rebuilding for 42 years.
Little did he know, the Bulls were about to be next. And for the next 25 years, one of sports' most valuable franchises, a team that still leads the NBA in attendance and social media following, would soon become trapped in an endless cycle of rebuilding. From Derrick Rose's tragic injury to Jimmy Butler's bitter departure. But every time the Bulls seemed ready to reclaim their throne, something went wrong. But to understand just how far the Bulls fell, we need to go back to where the cracks first appeared, right at the height of their power. It's 1998. Jordan has just hit the shot that sealed his 6th ring in 8 years. The Bulls dynasty seemed untouchable. Magic and Isaiah conquered in 91. Drexler and Barkley dominated in 92 and 93. Even Shaq and Penny, the only team to knock Jordan out of the playoffs in the 90s, couldn't stop him from coming back stronger. Now, he'd just taken down Karl Malone and the Jazz again. But while Jordan was winning battles on the court, he was losing a war behind the scenes. The tension between Jordan and Bulls management, particularly GM Jerry Krause, had been building for years. And it all came to a head when Krause made a statement that would haunt the franchise.
Quote that was attributed to you.
Well, as you know, David, there was a misquote. What I said was that players and coaches alone don't win championships, that organizations do. I do sincerely believe that organizations as a whole win. One part of it can't win alone.
That quote, whether misinterpreted or not, symbolized everything wrong with the Bulls' approach to their dynasty. While Jordan, Pippen, and Phil Jackson were making history on the court, the front office was already planning their demolition. What followed would be 25 years of trying to rebuild what they'd torn down. This is how the NBA's greatest dynasty became its longest running rebuild.
No one's guaranteeing rebuilding is going to be 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years.
But Krause and Reinsdorf weren't listening. While Jordan's warning hung in the air, Reinsdorf boldly told reporters it would take only 2 or 3 years to return to championship form. Okay, they thought they had the formula to success, but what they forgot, how hard it is to actually replicate greatness. The dismantling began quickly. Before the summer of '98 even started, Phil Jackson was gone. Jordan, true to his word about not playing for another coach, made it very clear he wouldn't return. As the lockout froze the entire league over money disputes, the basketball world watched in disbelief as the greatest dynasty in sports voluntarily broke itself apart.
Kind of a weird day here at the Berto Center. It was kind of neat. The doors were unlocked for the first time in 6 months. A number of guys came through, about a dozen of them. A lot of guys shooting, stretching, kind of getting ready for the season in an abbreviated amount of time. But no real news here from Deerfield. No Michael sighting, no Scottie Pippen sighting, that kind of stuff. Really, the only news of the day is when the Bulls Vice President Jerry Krause came out and read a prepared statement. Now, in that statement, he outlined 3 different ways that the Bulls could go about the season this year.
1. In case Jordan somehow decided to return, then the Bulls would simply re-sign a majority of last year's players and keep the team together. But if Jordan decided to retire, the team would either go aggressively for some of the best free agents on the market that year, which included a lot of good players like Jimmy Jackson, Jerry Stackhouse, and Vlade Divac, but no franchise guys. And the third option, as you're seeing on the screen, was to completely start over. Blow up the 1998 team and just start over, clean slate. Which option do you think Krause went with? After Mike was officially done with basketball for the second time, Krause wasted no time dismantling the rest of the championship roster. How fast? A year and a half. That's all it took for every key player from the second three-peat to disappear. By January 1999, Rodman was released, Kerr was traded to the Spurs, Scottie to the Rockets, and Longley to the Suns. Kukoc and Harper stuck around for the lockout season, but by the next year, they were gone too. Krause wanted a clean slate, and he had gotten the green light from ownership to rebuild from scratch. But here's my question. Couldn't he have gotten a little bit more in return? The team was past its prime, sure, but these weren't just throwaway pieces, they had value. I don't know what Krause was thinking. I mean, restarting one of the greatest franchises ever because of ego. Yeah, that makes no sense. Okay, but maybe I'm just thinking this all wrong. Maybe the real question is, who is Jerry Krause actually? Many just know him as the villain of The Last Dance, the little old man Jordan used to make fun of.
Those are the pills you take to keep it short. Those diet pills.
But what made this man tick? Did he love the game, or was it hate that kept him going? Jerry Krause was a complicated guy to say the least. He didn't rely on his charms to get things done. but when he needed, he got things done. He was a competitor. By his stature and Jordan's jokes, you can see that he wasn't a great athlete, but the man never backed away from a challenge. And here's him trying to play one-on-one with Michael freaking Jordan.
What, Jerry, you want to let you play with me? You got to lower the rim.
I think he was being serious there, by the way, but they always mocked him openly in public for anyone to hear. From what I read, Krause always thought he had a chance to win, no matter how the odds were stacked against him, and he loved sports. In high school, he played baseball, which he wasn't particularly gifted for. In college, he tried to be a sports writer, but he wasn't really cut out for that either. But he had one thing going for him. He could scout talent with his eyes closed, and he was really proud of that talent. So much so that he wanted his grave to say, "Here lies the heart and soul of a scout," which is pretty wild when you think of it, RIP. He actually got his start in baseball, working as a general manager for the AAA Portland Beavers. It didn't last long, he was fired in 1966. But Krause wasn't the type to just quit things because they didn't go his way. He jumped into scouting, where his knack for spotting talent made him stand out. Baseball or basketball, it didn't matter. He could look at a player and see something others missed. For the Baltimore Bullets, Krause pushed for Earl Monroe and Wes Unseld, future Hall of Famers, and he didn't stop there. While scouting for the Bullets, he stumbled on a lanky forward named Phil Jackson. Krause wanted to draft him in 1967, but the team passed. Still, Krause kept tabs on Jackson through his playing days and even into his stint coaching in the CBA. Years later, when Jackson was coaching in obscurity, Krause plucked him out of nowhere and brought him to Chicago. Okay, now while it's true that Krause didn't draft Jordan, he did do his best to put a team around him. But knowing both of their personalities, they barely got along. Well, more like rarely got along. Jerry Krause and Michael Jordan couldn't be more different. Krause didn't have Jordan's charisma or athleticism, but what he lacked in charm, he made up for in sheer stubbornness. They clashed constantly, and those clashes were legendary. Jordan called him crumbs and poked fun at his weight. Pippen wasn't any kinder, taking every chance to criticize Krause's decisions in public. People said Krause was jealous of their fame, their talent, their adoration. Maybe there's some truth to that, but it wasn't all personal. Krause believed in building a system, a structure bigger than any one player. That's why he traded Charles Oakley, Jordan's closest ally on the team, for Bill Cartwright. It was a move that ruffled feathers, but it worked. Cartwright anchored the Bulls' first 3 titles. Jordan thrived on proving people wrong, and Krause gave him plenty of fuel. Phil Jackson played the middleman, using Krause's unpopularity to unite the locker room. Krause wasn't trying to be liked either. He was trying to win. The fact that he was winning in his hometown of Chicago made everything sweeter.
From the perspective of being a native Chicagoan, what did it mean to you last year?
It was huge. When we were at Grant Park that day after we won it, I looked out and it was just a sea of people, and it was just amazing. I can't tell you the feeling in my heart, and it just all those emotions, and they were bottled up in me for a long time. They're just now starting to come out, but the feeling and the emotion, it was so special for me.
But those wins came at a cost. Krause's competitive streak didn't have an off switch. He wanted control and he wanted credit. The infamous organizations win championships line, it wasn't entirely wrong. He was trying to show the behind the scenes effort. But leaving out players didn't sit well with the players. Jordan, as you already know, took it personally. Pippen, even more so. And when Phil Jackson started gaining more recognition as the architect of the Bulls' success, Krause began to view him as a threat too. The tension wasn't always subtle either. By the late 90s, Krause openly said that the 98 season would be Phil's last, regardless of the outcome. That set the stage for the now famous The Last Dance, a season defined as much by championships as it was by impending doom. Despite all the friction, Krause and Jordan were still two sides of the same coin. They needed each other, even if they would never admit it. Krause built the structure and Jordan made it shine. It was messy, but it worked until it didn't. That's how life goes. Underneath all the championship banners and ticker tape parades, the crowds were growing. Krause, with his sharp eye for talent and relentless drive to control every piece of the puzzle, had alienated almost everyone on the team. Phil Jackson, out. Scottie Pippen, trade rumors swirled for years. Michael Jordan, well, MJ made it clear, no Phil, no Michael.
That's it. No Phil, no Michael.
Can you say it again?
By the summer of 1998, the writing wasn't just on the wall, it was pretty much carved in stone. The dynasty was done. But Krause didn't want to sit back and watch the team explode. Krause sped up the process. He believed the team's window was closing, and instead of letting it fade away, he ripped the band-aid straight off. He had the world against him, but Krause was determined to build another championship-winning team. The question was, could he do it? Okay, I know I've been delaying about the actual rebuild, and we're just making one more stop before talking about basketball, bear with me. John Jackson, the Chicago Suns time writer that covered the Bulls, explained that Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner, was eager to disband the 1998 team because of money. I mean, what else, right? In '98, while the Bulls were selling out arenas and selling merch like crazy, Reinsdorf spent $61 million on players. In terms of profits, it wasn't a great year for the Bulls. If he wanted to keep the same team, he would have had to pay them at least $80 million in 1999. The new team cost Reinsdorf less than half the money it did the year before. Considering how the jerseys were still selling and home attendance remained at the same level, the shortened lockout year was one of the most profitable in Bulls history. So with most of the major guys out, who was left? And better yet, how did they play? The answers are not a lot and not really. Tony Kukoc was still there. He was Krause's next big thing years before, and one of the guys that maintained a good relationship with him even after his career was over. Now, the guy was finally the leader of the team. He wasn't Michael or Scotty, but Kukoc could hoop. Then there was Ron Harper, who was solid but clearly hitting the end of his career. And of course, you had Dickie Simpkins, who went from role player to full-time starter. They brought in new faces too, like Brent Barry, a white guy that could dunk and shoot threes, which was cool. He would go on to be one of the best role players ever, but he was still young at this point. Then there was Cornell David, who was hyped up as the Michael Jordan of Hungary. But, well, let's just say the nickname didn't hold up. This was a team of guys trying to figure it out. Rookies like Corey Benjamin, more on him in a minute, castaways, and veterans hanging on for dear life. All in all, the team had no leader, no great coach, and no direction. A lot of the stuff here is from a Bleacher Report article on that '99 season where they interviewed all the players. So these are mostly first-hand recollections of what happened. Implementing the triangle offense with a team full of inexperienced players was like teaching calculus to first graders. It didn't help that the teacher, Tim Floyd, was unprepared for the chaos of the NBA. Floyd came in with a solid college coaching resume, but zero experience dealing with professional egos and grueling schedules. To make matters worse, he was seen as Jerry Krause's puppet, which didn't exactly win him in the locker room. Some veterans viewed him as a placeholder, while the young players were just trying to figure out where they fit. In reality, Krause tried hiring Tim multiple times, and thought he would make a great NBA coach someday. He wasn't exactly right. The schedule didn't do any favors either. With 50 games crammed into just a few months, the Bulls faced 14 back-to-backs and even the dreaded back-to-back-to-backs. For a team struggling to find chemistry, this was a death sentence. It culminated in what's now infamous, a 82-49 loss to Miami. To this day, this still remains the only time a team scored less than 50 since the 24-second shot clock was introduced. That game was a full-blown rock-bottom moment. It perfectly encapsulated the state of the team that season. Meanwhile, Krause's hands-on approach didn't help morale, always on the plane, at practices, and even on the team bus. His constant presence made players feel like they were under a microscope. For a team that was already drowning, this just added more baggage. Even in a season that felt like a prolonged funeral, there were moments of light. Kukoc stepped up as the team's best player, averaging 18 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. While those numbers were impressive, it became clear Kukoc wasn't built to lead a franchise solo. He was a brilliant piece of a larger puzzle, just not the entire picture. Still, his effort kept games from being completely unwatchable. The Bulls' hometown fans stuck around, filling the United Center every night. Despite the Bulls' record, Chicago's loyal basketball faithful weren't ready to abandon their team. Many had spent years unable to afford tickets during the dynasty and were now thrilled to finally experience the Bulls basketball in person, albeit a shadow of its former self. The energy definitely wasn't the same as the Jordan era, but there was still an undercurrent of hope. Jerry Krause, ever the optimist, stayed the course with his rebuilding plan. He pinned his hopes on the draft and free agency, determined to uncover the next cornerstone player. Unfortunately, attracting star free agents proved impossible. I mean, why would anyone want to follow the legacy of Michael Jordan and the dynasty? That pressure, combined with the front office unwilling to match top dollar offers, kept the Bulls from landing the big names they desperately needed. The most exciting thing that happened that year? Jordan returned. Not to play on the team though. Corey Benjamin, a rookie drafted during the Bulls rebuild, had confidence. Maybe too much of it. He kept telling anyone who'd listen that he could take Michael Jordan one-on-one. Jordan, retired at the time, heard the talk. And MJ doesn't just ignore a challenge, as you know. Even one from a 21-year-old rookie. One day unannounced, Jordan showed up at a Bulls practice. He didn't come to watch, he came to shut Corey up. Wearing sweats and no warm-up, he took to the court. What followed was a masterclass. Jordan quickly ran up the score, hitting shots Corey couldn't stop and trash-talking the entire time. Oh, and don't quote me on this, but I think this video made the saying,
"If you can't protect me, you reach, I teach."
I'm sure people were saying it before, but this definitely made it cooler. The score, Corey claims it was 11-9. Others say it was more like 11-0. Either way, the message was clear. The Bulls' new guard wasn't ready to fill MJ's shoes. Even Corey admitted later, it was like a dream come true and a nightmare all at once. The 99 Bulls, just like Corey that day, couldn't escape Jordan's shadow, forever chasing an unreachable legacy. With the first season in the can, the focus was 100% on the rebuilding process. And with a little luck and one of the worst rosters in the league, the Bulls managed to secure the #1 pick in the 1999 draft. And as I said earlier, Krause's scouting was always on point.
With the first pick in the 1999 NBA draft, the Chicago Bulls select Elton Brand from Duke University.
And Brand wasted no time proving he belonged in the NBA, averaging 20 points and 10 rebounds in his rookie season. He even snagged co-Rookie of the Year honors. Alongside him, the Bulls picked up Ron Artest, a scrappy defender with the kind of intensity you'd expect from a future star. Now, Brandon Artest actually had great rookie seasons, especially Brand, who ended up winning the Rookie of the Year award and looked like he could eventually become a player you could build your franchise around. For now, though, he didn't have an incredible impact on the team as a whole. The Bulls roster won just 4 more games than in 1999, so they had a much worse winning percentage. However, they still had the largest attendance in the NBA, so the fans weren't ready to give up on this timeline. And Jerry Krause was still determined to find that player that would turn things around for the franchise. Or maybe even 3. Heading into the 2000 offseason with a lot of cap space and plans for a super team, Krause went all in. The targets? Tim Duncan, Grant Hill, and Tracy McGrady. Even if one of them had signed, it might have changed everything. But here's the thing about the post-Jordan Bulls. They weren't exactly the league's hottest destination. Okay, 1, Duncan didn't even consider leaving San Antonio. McGrady, well, he opted for sunny Orlando, even after a pitch from Oprah herself. And Hill, well, let's just say Chicago wasn't high on his list either.
My first year and second year were the youngest team in the league, right? And the fans knew, like, okay, it's going to be a rebuilding year. My rookie year, Jerry thought he was going to get Grant Hill, Tim Duncan, and
you gotta explain that.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously MJ just retired, right? Yeah. We have all this cap space, and so we have all these rookies, and he was like, "We're gonna go back and look. I guarantee Grant, Tim, and T-Mac were all free agents." And Jerry wholeheartedly believed we would get all 3 of them, even if we get 2 of them at the time. Right.
When the dust settled, Krause was left empty-handed. Instead of superstars, the Bulls ended up with Ron Mercer and Brad Miller. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with these guys. These guys were all-star caliber players who played major roles on competing squads in their careers, just not on the Bulls. As it's the theme with this period, they got these guys too early. In spite of Brand being the most productive player for the rebuild, Krause decided to trade him to the Clippers as early as 2001. In the 01 draft, the Bulls had the 4th pick, which they used to draft the high school phenom, Eddie Curry, who was nicknamed Baby Shaq mainly due to his size, which he used to dominate players his age. Although, if you've watched any of my older videos, you know that every high schooler that's tall, strong, has some skill, is nicknamed the next Shaq. Simply put, the NBA tends to be a copycat league. Krause traded Brand for the 2nd pick, Tyson Chandler.
The Los Angeles Clippers have traded the rights to Tyson Chandler and the contract of Brian Skinner to the Chicago Bulls for Elton Brand.
Another high school big who had plenty of potential, but obviously couldn't make an impact right away because he was still a teenager coming into the league. Pairing him with Eddie Curry, another high school pick, seemed, let's just say, bold. In reality, something a lot of people surely were aware of even back then, it left the team stuck in neutral. And then there was the misses. Marcus Fizer, a 4th overall pick in 2000, never quite found his role. Dalibor Bagaric, he barely saw the floor. And if you recognize their names, you're insane. You're either a Bulls diehard or have some crazy NBA knowledge. Krause's obsession with untapped potential meant the Bulls were often waiting on players who never delivered. Amid the chaos of those early 2000 seasons, there were moments, fleeting as they might have been, that hinted at a brighter future. The so-called Baby Bulls era began to shape, led by a trio of young players, Tyson Chandler, Eddie Curry, and Jamal Crawford. While the development was slow, you couldn't deny the potential was there, somewhere. Chandler, a defensive powerhouse in the making, started showing flashes of what he could become. Sure, his offense was limited, but his energy on the boards and his ability to alter shots gave Bulls fans a reason to stay hopeful. Eddie Curry, on the other hand, was a scoring machine in the post when he wanted to be, but conditioning and effort were always a question mark. Crawford, meanwhile, was the wild card. Of course, as you know, there was his handle. His scoring bursts, electric, but consistency, not so much. Still, on the right night, he could drop 30 and leave fans wondering if he was the team's future star. The 2002 draft brought another potential savior.
You know, there's already 2 Jason Williamses in the NBA. Soon there may be 3.
The former Duke standout was seen as a polished point guard who could bring stability to the backcourt. Unfortunately, while Krause was happy with his choice, the rest of the team, especially Crawford, didn't share the same excitement.
The Bulls, they draft Jay Williams.
I was sick.
Did you feel some type of way?
I was sick.
Yeah, so talk about that.
Because I came in as a lottery pick my first year. I didn't play a lot. Coach didn't like me, and I was immature. I had a lot of growing to do on and off the court. I feel my game going to another level from first to second year working out with MJ. Tear my ACL.
Ooh.
I come back early. People's like, don't come back. I'm like, nah, I want to hoop. I came back early, played 23 games. Shot my highest percentage, it was in a full year, but for any season in 20 years that year, because I was just working on my jumper, working on my getting stronger. So the third year, I'm like, all right, I'm healthy, I'm primed to go. People forget Jay Williams had the hype Reggie Bush had in football.
He did. Yes, he did.
Jay Williams at Duke was like Reggie Bush at SC. So I already know, like,
it was a lot of hype with him.
A lot.
He comes to work out for the Bulls, and then we know each other, right? We know each other a couple All-Star games.
Competitively know each other.
Yes, absolutely.
You guys are both in the same class.
Bro, we're the same
him.
class. We played at Michigan and Duke versus each other. So now we really know each other.
Right.
And his workout, after he worked out, we all hooped. And we're going at it like so I'm like, all right, I already know what's coming. You know I'm here. Are they gonna draft him? I'm sitting in the Bulls facility. If you guys, I'm gonna get Eddie Curry so you can confirm this story. We're sitting in the facility. We're watching the draft in that practice facility. Everybody in the front office there. They draft him. I walk out. I'm pissed. I walk out in front of you. Never heard that either. I walk out. I'm pissed.
Right.
Despite how Crawford might have felt at the moment, Jay's rookie season was promising. He recorded a triple-double early in the season, in a win against Jason Kidd and the New Jersey Nets. His 9 points, 4 assists, and a spot on the all-rookie second team wasn't crazy, especially for the second pick in the draft, but he was playing decently. Despite flaws in his game like a lack of a shot, he improved as the season went along. And despite only winning 30 games, the season was seen as a step in the right direction for the franchise. Management thought they could build a team around Williams over the next few years. And while they might not see the playoffs just yet, they could still select a couple of more pieces through the draft. Things were finally looking up for the organization. However, as you'll soon find out, when it comes to the Bulls, every good move they make is followed by a string of bad luck. A motorcycle accident after his first season ended Jay Williams' career before it even started.
I was terrified. It was a horrible feeling because I remember I couldn't really not feel it in my leg. But the first thing coming to my mind wasn't about I don't want to die or, I was really stupid for doing it. My first thought in my mind that came to my mind was I threw it all away because a stupid mistake happened to me.
Once again, the Bulls were left scrambling. Through it all, one thing remained consistent though: the fans. Despite the losses piling up, the United Center stayed packed. Chicago's faithful still believed in their team, still wore their jerseys, and still cheered every dunk, block, and improbable win. That loyalty was a testament to the dynasty's lasting impact. Bulls fans weren't just showing up for the current roster, they were honoring the past while hoping for a better future. Krause, for all his missteps, didn't stop trying. His belief in rebuilding through the draft was unshaken, even as free agency continued to be a non-starter. The players he picked weren't bad, they just didn't come together the way anyone had hoped. And as the losses continued to pile up, Krause's tenure in Chicago was starting to get shaky. By the time Jerry Krause stepped down as general manager in 2003, the writing was definitely on the wall. The team had posted dismal records since the breakup of the dynasty, and Krause's ambitious rebuild had yet to produce meaningful results. From 1999 to 2003, the Bulls' combined record was 83-215, a stark contrast to the glory days when winning 60 games in a season felt routine. Krause's final years were marked by his relentless search for the next great player. He pursued high upside prospects like Tyson Chandler and Eddie Curry, and gambled on Jay Williams, and even brought in Jamal Crawford, but the results were underwhelming. His free agency efforts repeatedly struck out, leaving the team to rely almost entirely on the draft. And while his eye for talent was undeniable, his inability to develop it into a cohesive unit became his undoing.
Welcome back. Jerry Krause did not talk to the masses upon resigning. In fact, he offered a statement, and it's that kind of response that gave critics fuel to their fire. Krause, not the personal type to pal around, preferring to let his job and record speak for itself.
When Krause resigned, he cited health reasons, but it was clear his departure was also about the team's lack of progress. Despite the criticism he faced, Krause left behind a legacy. I mean, come on, creating one of the most famous dynasties ever isn't a small feat. It's something that should be celebrated. He was posthumously inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2017, earning the recognition he had long sought. Even with all his flaws, you can't deny Krause's impact on the NBA and the Chicago Bulls. That's why it's so hard to hear his name getting booed in front of his wife during the Ring of Honor night.
So the fans who booed, they know who they are, and that's to me it's absolutely shameful, and I'm devastated by that.
And this is really an unfortunate thing because this was supposed to be such a special night, and now this is what most people are going to remember.
It just feels like it's overshadowing what should have been a celebration in a pretty horrible way.
Whether you like Jerry Krause or not, that man's dead. Rest in peace. His wife is there, and y'all made that lady cry, and that was total BS. Wife, kids, grandkids. That was wrong, man. To have that lady crying like that, that hurt my heart watching that thing. That was painful.
His vision brought 6 championships to Chicago, and his belief in building through the draft laid the foundation for the team's eventual resurgence under new leadership. But by the time he left, the Bulls were still far from reclaiming their former glory, a shadow they would struggle to escape for years to come. The 2004 season marked the end of an era for the Bulls, albeit one defined more by missteps than success. Krause's ambitious rebuild had officially failed, but his vision wasn't entirely without merit. His focus on young talent laid the groundwork for what would become the Baby Bulls era, a team that, under Paxson's leadership, would finally begin to climb out the shadow of Jordan in the dynasty years. The Baby Bulls, featuring players like Heinrich, Ben Gordon, Luol Deng, would go on to become a playoff team by the mid-2000s. But that success felt light years away in 2003. For now, the Bulls were still a work in progress. With Krause gone, now the management needed to find another GM, and there were a couple of candidates for the job right away.
Okay, looking ahead, the top candidates are B.J. Armstrong, who has been a special assistant to Jerry Krause for the last 3 years, so a lot of people think he's being groomed. Also, Jim Stack, who's a Pacers assistant coach right now, spent 13 seasons in the Bulls front office, so he also is a top candidate. And John Paxson, the radio analyst, his name always gets tossed into the ring.
As you can see, and we'll see later in the video, the Bulls owner always liked to keep things in the family. So 2 out of the top 3 candidates were former Bulls who won rings with Jordan and co. The job eventually fell into the lap of one, John Paxson, who was a guard for the team during the first three-peat.
The Chicago Bulls just welcomed their new vice president of basketball operations. He hates this. I tell you, he absolutely detests all this. But a standing ovation throughout the United Center. Pax was trying to hide over in the hallway, and it couldn't happen. And John, we also have to say get well to Jerry Krause. And he stepped down realizing that his health was deteriorating. JK, please do us all a favor, take care of everything, get well. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.
As soon as he set foot in the front office, Paxson immediately set about reshaping the team's identity. Unlike Krause, who had gambled on high prospects with raw potential, Paxson prioritized players with proven college success. Kirk Heinrich was his first building block in 2003, a scrappy guard from Kansas who played with grit and heart. The 2004 draft saw Paxson double down, adding Ben Gordon from UConn and Luol Deng from Duke, both polished players with championship pedigrees. This trio became the foundation for what would later become the Baby Bulls. But 15 games in, the Bulls also made a coaching change.
All right, let's talk about the Nets opponent tonight, the Chicago Bulls. They made a coaching change. Bill Cartwright out, Scott Skiles in.
Replacing Cartwright, there was Scott Skiles, a no-nonsense leader who was the antithesis of the Krause-era coaches. Skiles demanded defense, discipline, and effort, and he wasn't afraid to call out anyone who failed to meet his standards. His blunt approach wasn't always popular, but it was exactly what this young team needed. The goal was to rebuild the culture of the franchise.
Last minute talk.
But things didn't start as good as many would hope for. The 2005 season began as disastrous as it could. The Bulls lost their first 9 games, tying a franchise record for the worst start. Critics dismissed them as more of the same, a team with no direction, destined to languish in the basement of the Eastern Conference. But behind the scenes, something was brewing. Scout's emphasis on defense began to resonate, and the team slowly started to buy into his system. By midseason, the Baby Bulls were hooping. Chandler emerged as a defensive powerhouse, averaging 9 rebounds and 1 block per game. Ben Gordon, coming off the bench, became the team's closer.
Another player who can heat up quickly is Chicago's Ben Gordon. Named 6th man of the year in his rookie season, he earned a reputation for fourth quarter heroics, and at times, he feels that he just can't miss.
And surprisingly, Gordon became the first and only player in NBA history to win 6th man of the year as a rookie. His ability to deliver in clutch moments was second only to LeBron James that season. The team's other rookie, Luol Deng, also brought versatility and consistency on both ends of the floor. Then there was Andres Nocioni, a hard-nosed forward from Argentina, whose relentless energy made him a fan favorite.
Nocioni running hard. Goes. Oh my goodness!
The turnaround was stunning. The Bulls finished the season with a 47-35 record, good enough for the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. And for the first time since Michael Jordan's departure, the team was back in the playoffs. Their defensive identity became their calling card. They led the league in their opponents having the lowest field goal percentage and held teams under 100 points in 26 consecutive games, a franchise record.
We welcome you to Game 1 of TNT's playoff doubleheader. A sellout crowd better than 21,000 will pack the United Center here in Chicago as this series...
In the playoffs, the Bulls faced the Washington Wizards. They took an early 2-0 series lead, igniting hope in Chicago. However, on the road, they couldn't win a single game. Eddie Curry was out due to heart problems, and Luol Deng tore a ligament in his wrist. So the Bulls weren't at full strength. But Game 5, they were back home.
The Chicago Bulls at home against the Washington Wizards. It's Game 5 in a 2-2 series. The Bulls have been a different team at home and on the road. Which team will show up tonight at the United Center? Let's get you back to Chicago.
Despite Kirk Hinrich managing to rebound his own miss from the free throw line and pass it to Pargo for a game-tying three-pointer. But the Wizards had 5 seconds on the clock, and that was too much time for Gilbert Arenas.
By Hinrich. Both teams over the limit. Here's Arenas. This for the win. Yes! It's over! The Wizards have defeated the Bulls!
That dagger proved too much for the young Bulls. The Wizards managed to take the series in 6 games, ending the Bulls' improbable run. Despite the first-round exit, the season was a revelation. The Baby Bulls were no longer a joke. They were a team with promise and a fan base that refused to give up on them. Skiles had instilled a culture of accountability, and Paxson's vision of building through proven talent was paying dividends. For the first time in years, the Bulls weren't looking back at their dynasty. They were actually looking forward.
Well, I'm very, very positive on the Bulls' future. I think John has done a fantastic job of rearranging the roster, and we like all of our young players. We want to keep those guys. It's turned around. It's turned around quickly. We trust our guys, and we believe in them, and we're in a position here now where we can not just make the playoffs. We can get out of that first round, and who knows what can happen.
The success of the 2005 season laid the groundwork for cautious optimism, but the Chicago Bulls still faced significant challenges. The offseason saw the team make a defining decision, trading Eddie Curry. Concerns over his heart condition loomed large, and the franchise wasn't willing to gamble its future. Curry, along with Antonio Davis, was sent to the New York Knicks in exchange for a package that included Jermaine Jackson, Mike Sweetney, and Tim Thomas. Oh, and draft picks. A whole lot of draft picks. The Bulls at this point were determined to build around their young core and develop them themselves. Without Curry's interior scoring presence, the Bulls leaned heavily on their defensive identity. Tyson Chandler became the team's primary big man, anchoring the defense alongside a backcourt that was growing into one of the league's most formidable. Ben Gordon continued to shine in his role as a super sub, delivering clutch performances night after night. Meanwhile, Luol Deng developed into a steady contributor on both ends of the floor. Despite their defensive grit, the Bulls struggled to find consistency during the regular season. They ended the year with a 41-41 record, which was good enough to scrape into the playoffs.
Time now for the starting lineups delivered by AT&T. Very familiar lineups for the Miami side, but when you start with the Bulls, it's adjusted as they've made this run here toward the playoffs. Andres Nocioni, the Argentine, Michael Sweetney, and Malik Allen. The backcourt, as Steve talked about, Kirk Hinrich and Ben Gordon.
In the first round, they faced the Miami Heat, a team stacked with talent led by Shaq and D. Wade. The Bulls put up a valiant fight, but Miami's star power proved too much. Chicago lost the series in 6 games, but the lessons learned in those battles would serve the young core well in the future. Okay, John Paxson's most aggressive move came in the summer of 2006. The Bulls signed Ben Wallace, a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, to a lucrative free agent deal. Wallace was brought in to bolster the team's interior defense and provide veteran leadership. It was a high-profile signing that signaled Chicago's intent to climb further up the Eastern Conference hierarchy.
Everything happened so fast. I think the Bulls, a great organization, a young up-and-coming team, and they made me an offer that I, pretty much couldn't refuse.
Wallace's arrival was not without controversy. His hefty contract drew criticism, especially given his limited offensive game. Nonetheless, his defensive pedigree was undeniable, and the Bulls hoped his presence would solidify their identity as a hard-nosed, defensive-first team. With Wallace in the fold, the expectation for the 07 season was sky high, and they didn't disappoint. They gave their fans the best regular season performance since the Jordan era. They finished with a 49-33 record. Pretty good, earning the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. By now, the core of Gordon, Deng, and Heinrich had fully matured into reliable contributors, and the team's bench provided valuable depth. The highlight of the season came in the first round of the playoffs. Chicago swept the defending champion Miami Heat in 4 games. A stunning statement that the Bulls were no longer just a scrappy upstart. The team's defense suffocated Miami. Ben Wallace especially shined, holding Shaq to 0 points in the 4th quarter of Game 4.
And now up 3-0 in the series, up 5 with 3 minutes to go. The Heat have only scored 29 points this half. Heinrich starts the defense. O'Neal fighting for it on the deck. Gordon ripped it away, and a foul is called. Foul on Wade.
That's his 5th.
On the other side of the court, Gordon and Deng carried the offensive load. Deng, in particular, was sensational, averaging 26 points per game in the series and establishing himself as one of the league's rising stars. However, the dream run ended in the 2nd round against the Detroit Pistons. Detroit's experience and firepower overwhelmed Chicago, and the Bulls fell in 6 games. For sure, it was a frustrating end, but it underscored the team's primary weakness: the lack of a true superstar.
And his club advances to the conference finals for the 5th consecutive year after posting a 95-85 victory.
Although no one was aware of it at the time, the 2007 season marked the apex of the Baby Bulls era. Sure, the team had achieved success through teamwork and defense. However, it became increasingly clear that a roster built around role players had its limitations. Gordon and Deng were great, don't get me wrong, but they weren't guys you can build a team around. Without a go-to scorer who could take over games, the Bulls' ceiling was Eastern Conference semifinals. The next steps will be critical. Could Paxson find the missing piece to elevate the team to be real contenders? For now, the Baby Bulls had shown they could compete with the best, but the path forward was pretty uncertain. Okay, hold on real quick. I need to talk about something that didn't happen. But if it did happen, the NBA would be completely different today.
So that was true, you were going to go to the Bulls?
Yeah, it was a story in ESPN, I think it was ESPN Magazine, and they asked you a question about me and Penny. And you said that we're essentially the same.
But I think you took that the wrong way because of all the misquotes and all the bad stuff.
I probably did. And I probably used his motivation too.
Yeah.
Saying, listen, if this is the conversation, I don't want this conversation. When I retire, I don't want people to say, okay, he only won because of Shaq. As unfair as that is, Magic never won without Cap. Michael never won without Scotty. So, but here I am getting stuck with this argument, which is not fair, but yet this is the argument people will make, and I'm not okay with that.
I had actually heard that, but I didn't believe it.
We're looking for places in Chicago, man. We're flying up there to meet with Reinsdorf and
You want to
Paxson.
leave sunny California to go to cold-ass Chicago.
Vanessa signed off. We're moving out to, I think it was Lake Forest, I think it was, Chicago.
Despite Kobe putting up Wilt Chamberlain numbers at stretches, the Lakers were floundering, unable to surround him with a supporting cast capable of making deep playoff runs. Bryant, determined to rewrite his legacy apart from Shaq, publicly demanded a trade. Among his preferred destinations was Chicago, a city he admired for its basketball culture and its connection to MJ. So, was this thing all that serious? Was he really about to get traded? Yeah, pretty much so.
With the 2007 NBA draft just around the corner, which superstar is more likely to be traded first, Kobe or KG?
The whole thing was all over the media. Kobe was at war with the Lakers, and he wasn't subtle about it at all. Some random fans even caught Kobe on camera blasting the Lakers for not trading for Jason Kidd and trashing Andrew Bynum.
An amateur video supposedly taken in a parking lot last month shows Bryant ripping Laker management and teammate Andrew Bynum. Bryant profanely blasted the Lakers' failure to trade for Jason Kidd. The men who shot the video after happening upon Bryant in the parking lot of a shopping center had been peddling it to news outlets. A shorter teaser version was on YouTube briefly. The video owners, who want to remain anonymous, intend to offer viewing for $1.99 through their website.
Discussions between the Lakers and Bulls gained serious traction. The proposed deal was enormous. Kobe would go to Chicago in exchange for a package centered around Luol Deng, Ben Gordon, Joakim Noah, and Tyrese Thomas. It was a high price for sure, but it was one the Bulls seriously considered. Adding Bryant to their core of Kirk Heinrich and Ben Wallace promised instant credibility in the Eastern Conference and a chance to compete for a ring. However, there was one major obstacle: Kobe's no-trade clause. At the time, Bryant was the only NBA player with this clause, giving him the ability to veto any trade. While he was open to joining Chicago, Kobe insisted that Deng remain on the roster. In his view, Deng was a crucial piece of the puzzle, an ideal running mate who he thought he would need to contend. This impasse ultimately derailed the trade. The Lakers were unwilling to part with Bryant without receiving Deng in return, and the Bulls couldn't make the deal without gutting their roster. Kobe's insistence on Deng staying in Chicago left the two sides at a stalemate. Adding to the complexity, the Lakers front office was very hesitant to trade a player of Bryant's caliber, knowing that such a move could alienate their fan base. Like a recent trade that just happened. The optimism surrounding the Baby Bulls began to unravel during the 08 season. Coming off a promising campaign, expectations were high, but the team stumbled out of the gate. The chemistry that had defined their earlier success seemed to evaporate. Scott Skiles, who had been instrumental in the team's culture reset, found himself at odds with his roster. His hard-nosed, no-nonsense style, once a strength, now clashed with a team that was beginning to tune him out. The results on the court reflected the discord. By Christmas, the Bulls had a dismal record, and the front office decided it was time for a change. Skiles was fired, marking the end of his tenure in Chicago. The midseason coaching change did little to stabilize the team. Interim head coach Jim Boylan struggled to galvanize the roster, and the team's play remained erratic. Ben Wallace, once seen as the defensive anchor of the team, was now viewed as a poor fit in Skiles' system, and was traded to Cleveland in a midseason shakeup. The younger core of Ben Gordon, Luol Deng, and Kirk Hinrich continued to show flashes of brilliance, but the team lacked the cohesion and consistency needed to compete. Role players like Joakim Noah and Tyrese Thomas had moments of promise, but couldn't really elevate the team's overall performance. The 2008 Bulls finished with a disappointing 33-49 record, a far cry from their success just a season prior. For a team that had prided itself on its defensive identity, the regression was stark. Missing the playoffs for the first time in years felt like a significant step backward for the franchise, and really marked the end of the Baby Bulls era as it had been envisioned. The once promising Baby Bulls were no longer viewed as a group on the rise, but rather as a collection of talented players who couldn't quite mesh. Fans, who had stuck with the team through years of post-dynasty struggles, were now left questioning whether the rebuild had failed. However, amid the chaos, there was one glimmer of hope, a chance to reset and redefine the future. The franchise had a lottery pick in the upcoming draft, and while expectations were tempered, fate had one more twist in store for the Bulls. This chapter of turmoil set the stage for what would become the most unexpected and thrilling turning point in years. June 26th, 2008, the day the Bulls got a miracle.
And that means the number one pick in the 2008 NBA draft will be made by the Chicago Bulls.
A team coming off a disappointing 33-49 season suddenly found itself holding the first pick in the NBA draft. Despite just a 1.7% chance of landing it, whether it was luck, fate, or David Stern, it didn't matter. The Bulls had the opportunity to change their future overnight.
With the first pick in the 2008 NBA draft, the Chicago Bulls select Derrick Rose.
A Chicago native born and raised in Inglewood, Rose's journey from the South Side to the top of the basketball world captivated the city. The hometown kid was coming to save his city's team.
After a year away from home at Memphis, Derrick Rose is going back home to Chicago.
But with that homecoming came immense pressure. Now, Rose had some expectations placed on him, big ones. Most people expected him to be not only great, but pretty much the second coming of MJ in Chicago. Every highlight reel dunk, every fast break, and every clutch moment would be compared to the man who turned Chicago into one of the most famous basketball cities in the world. Finally, this looked like a new era for the Windy City. They may have just landed their MJ for the 21st century. Fans packed the United Center, chanting MVP before he'd even play an NBA game. Rose, soft-spoken and humble, let his play do the talking. The franchise, which had struggled to find an identity since Jordan's retirement, suddenly had a reason to believe again. Now, Rose, despite being a pretty reserved guy, didn't shy away from the spotlight when it came to showing his game on the court. He basically continued where he left off in college. Admittedly, his rookie numbers, 16 points, 6 assists, and about 4 rebounds, weren't like historic or anything, but nonetheless, they were really good. Good enough to give the city of Chicago even more hope, and win some trophies.
The presentation of the Rookie of the Year Award with NBA Commissioner David Stern and Doug Collins. All eyes on this sensational rookie out of Memphis University in Chicago, born and raised, Derrick Rose.
Well, you think, Kevin, just what this young guy's been through over the last year and a half or so. I mean, goes to University of Memphis, gets his team into the NCAA Finals, loses a very tough game in overtime, comes into Chicago. This is his home. All of his family are here. First pick in the draft, Rookie of the Year, and it's amazing. He said, all year long, I really sort of downplay it, but I really wanted to win this award because it shows how hard you have to work. Look at his mother there. I mean, this lady's got to be so proud. His brothers, Well, what a wonderful family. This is a very humble young guy. And you think about this, John Paxson, Vinny Del Negro, the Chicago Bulls have this young guy, if he stays healthy, to be their quarterback for the next 10 or more years. What a great luxury to have.
Those last words sound haunting and kinda sad in 2025, but let's go back to 2008. Again, despite the play of their next big star, the team wasn't playing well at all. The Bulls barely scraped into the 7th seed at 41-41, and the rewards for their efforts was a first-round matchup against the defending champions, the Boston Celtics. On paper, it looked like a sweep, but on the court, it was a little bit different.
Welcome to the beginning of the NBA playoffs. We are at TD Bank North Garden, the home of the Boston Celtics. Game 1 between the Celtics and the visiting Chicago Bulls.
In his playoff debut, Rose announced himself to the basketball world with a monster performance. The Celtics' vaunted defense, known for its intensity and discipline, had no answers for Rose's relentless attacks. He would end up tying Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record for the most points scored by a rookie in their first playoff game. The Bulls stole Game 1 in overtime, 105-103, on the road in Boston, and suddenly, the basketball world took notice. Rose was fearless. He sliced through the Celtics' defense like a hot knife through butter, making even seasoned defenders like Rajon Rondo and Paul Pierce look a step too slow. His performance was so electrifying that comparisons to MJ started to creep into the narrative. The Celtics responded in Game 2, with Ray Allen dropping 30 points and hitting a game-winning three-pointer to even the series.
To run a little pick and roll with Paul Pierce to get him to the middle of the floor and then letting him go to work. Rose is on Rondo. Allen over Noah. Oh!
Ben Gordon countered with 42 points in Game 2, setting the tone for a back-and-forth slugfest between two determined teams. And Game 3 was a rare blowout, with the Celtics dominating. But the Bulls bounced back in Game 4, led by John Salmons and Noah. Noah's energy and defensive tenacity complemented Rose's offensive brilliance, and the Bulls cloud out a double overtime victory. Game 5 saw Pierce take over, hitting a series of clutch shots to put the Celtics on the brink of advancing. But Game 6 was a masterpiece. In a triple overtime thriller, Rose, Gordon, and Noah gave everything they had. Noah's coast-to-coast steal and dunk over Pierce became one of this series-defining moments.
Salmons fights through a screen. Noah knocked it away, galloping with Pierce.
And the Bulls eked out a 128-127 victory to force Game 7. By the time Game 7 rolled around, both teams were exhausted. The Celtics, playing at home, leaned on their experience and the poise of Pierce and Allen to close out the series with a 109-99 win. Rose, who was visibly drained from carrying the Bulls through 6 grueling games, still managed to leave his mark on the series. Though the Bulls lost, they walked away with their heads high. The series cemented Rose's status as the future of the franchise and one of the NBA's brightest young stars. It also reinforced the belief that the Bulls were no longer a team in transition. They were contenders in the making.
Me and Mike, when I was younger, I used to always feel like I was going to get jinxed because I was winning a lot. So 9th grade, after I met them, after I went to that crib, it went away. I'm like, man, fuck that. I'm gonna get that lifestyle. My mom gonna live decent. Whatever I gotta do, I gotta do it. And I promised myself that night I was gonna be on a mission. And me seeing that, with MJ giving me that opportunity, it made me, he let me manifest my dreams from what I saw. So I appreciate that, MJ.
While unfair to a rookie, his first year underscored the weight of expectations that came with wearing a Bulls jersey. Rose never shied away from it. Instead, he embraced the MJ comparisons. The Celtics series was a baptism by fire for Derrick Rose. It showcased his potential to be not only a great player, but a transformative one. And for the first time in over a decade, the Bulls had their new superstar. The city rallied behind its new hero, ready for the next chapter in the Derrick Rose era. As the 2010 season began, Derrick Rose continued to ascend. His confidence grew, his skills sharpened, and his leadership on the court became more apparent. Rose increased his scoring average to 20 points per game, while maintaining over 6 assists. The Bulls improved marginally, finishing the season 41-41 once again, and earning the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. The playoffs, however, were a harsh reminder of the Bulls' limitations. Matched against LeBron and the Cavs, the Bulls were outclassed in 5 games. Despite the early exit, D. Rose was as great as a second-year player could be, averaging 26 points in the series. Even casual NBA fans began to realize that D. Rose was quickly becoming the cornerstone of the franchise, and the King was certainly impressed.
LeBron, you said that you can't play Derrick for the better part of the game, but would you like to play him a little bit more? And do you anticipate maybe getting to him a little bit earlier?
He's a great player. He's gonna get around anybody in this league because of how his quickness and his ball handling ability. But at the same time, you show him different bodies in front of him, and it may keep him off balance.
But the team needed more. Rose needed help, and the Bulls front office knew it. That summer, they went all in on free agency, aiming to pair Rose with another superstar. The summer of 2010 could have changed everything for the Bulls. LeBron James, Wade, and Bosh all considered playing for the Bulls during their free agency sweepstakes. Both the Bulls management and players were actively trying to get these guys.
I was gonna ask you about the 2010 summer when all the craziness is going on with Bron.
Right, let's be clear. I had to wait for every other free agent to sign before the
When
Bulls gave me cap space.
When all this happened, you know how good you guys are. You know what your potential is and everything like that. Like, what are you thinking watching all this stuff?
I'm thinking that we're gonna get all. I'm thinking they're coming to Chicago.
Was there a period where you were like, you really thought that they were coming?
Yeah, I mean, I had Chris Bosh basically told me, "Yo, I'm coming to Chicago." If Chris Bosh came to Chicago, I mean, do they go to Miami? Do they stay in Miami? I don't know. I tried to recruit all of them. Like, I didn't care.
And it turns out Noah wasn't even correct there. Rose did reach out to all three to pitch the idea of playing together.
Were you thinking at all what it would be like? Did you ever in your mind say, I could imagine running with Dwayne Wade and LeBron James?
Oh, yeah. I tried, too. Like, people always said I didn't recruit. I tried to recruit. I put out a video, but it wasn't for me to say that. I felt like the organization was supposed to say that, and they didn't.
What did you do?
I put out a video for them, to him, Chris Bosh, and LeBron.
And the organization didn't send it?
I mean, it ain't for me to say that, but yeah, they didn't say anything about it. They sent it. I don't know if they really actually looked at it, but I made a video, but at the time, it wasn't for me to say that.
Ultimately, we know what ended up happening.
So it's Wade's house, LeBron's kingdom, and Bosh's pit, baby.
The Bulls were left empty-handed in their pursuit of the league's elite talents. Still, the front office made moves to bolster the roster, getting Carlos Boozer from Utah on a sign-and-trade and adding depth with Kyle Korver, Ronnie Brewer, and C.J. Watson. Okay, the disappointment of missing out on James and Wade was short-lived. However, what followed was the most magical season Chicago had experienced since Jordan.
Hey, Derek in the back. You won the Rookie of the Year award. You made your first All-Star team a year ago. Now people around the league are talking about you taking the next jump to becoming a top 10 player in the league. I know you've never been one to back away from a challenge. What kind of expectations do you set for yourself individually going into year 3?
It's high. The way I look at it within myself, why not? Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league? I don't see why. Why can't I do that?
And he did exactly that. At just 22 years old, he became the youngest player in NBA history to win the MVP award. His season was nothing short of spectacular. 25 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds per game, all while leading the Bulls to a league-best 62-20 record. He played with a relentless drive that redefined what a modern point guard could be. He was the team's primary scorer, playmaker, and leader.
Thank you, Tim Chaney and Kia Motors. Derek, you've had a career year so far. You led this Bulls team to the best record in the NBA. You are the youngest MVP in NBA history, and in a league of very valuable players, you are the most valuable, and it is my pleasure to award to you the Kia NBA 2010-11 MVP trophy.
Whether it was a thunderous dunk over a defender or a clutch step-back jumper, Rose delivered highlight after highlight. The Bulls were now back, and it was like legit this time. For the first time since Michael Jordan retired, the Bulls actually felt like a contender. The playoffs began with high expectations, and the Bulls didn't disappoint. They cruised through the first 2 rounds, dispatching the Indiana Pacers and Atlanta Hawks. And Rose was spectacular throughout, dropping 44 points in Game 3 against Atlanta, the highest scoring playoff performance of his career.
All of you who said, boy, is he really the MVP? Is this guy the best player in the league? Can we have you out there, folks? Derrick Rose, highest scoring total of his career.
Then came the Eastern Conference Finals against the Miami Heat. It was the ultimate test, Rose versus LeBron, the league's reigning MVP versus its new crown prince. The series started with promise. The Bulls dominated Game 1, winning by 21 points in front of a raucous United Center crowd. Rose looked unstoppable, and Chicago's defense suffocated Miami's big 3. But the Heat adjusted. Led by James and Wade, Miami won 4 straight games to take the series in 5. Rose fought valiantly, averaging 23 points, but he struggled against Miami's defense, particularly in crunch time. And let me tell you, the Heat threw everything at him. Double teams, traps, and relentless pressure. And the lack of a secondary scorer on the Bulls became glaring. Chicago's championship hopes were dashed. But the season was a resounding success. Rose's rise to superstardom had been cemented. April 28th, 2012. Game 1 of the first round playoff series against the Philadelphia 76ers. The Bulls, the top seed in the East for the second straight year, had championship aspirations. They were dominating the game with a comfortable lead late in the fourth quarter. That's when disaster struck.
Oh, Rose came down bad on his left foot. See him holding onto his knee. He was flying and he came down wrong on the left foot. Now, whether it was an ankle or a knee, I do not know.
The arena fell silent. Rose was helped off the court, and within hours, the worst was confirmed: a torn ACL. In an instant, the Bulls' championship hopes evaporated, and Rose's career trajectory took an irreversible turn. The injury was devastating, not just for Rose, but for the entire city of Chicago. The MVP of the league, the hometown hero, was now facing one of the most grueling recoveries in professional sports. Rose spent the entirety of the 2013 season rehabbing his knee. Despite persistent speculation about his return, he and the Bulls medical staff made the difficult decision to keep him sidelined until he was fully healthy.
It's a loaded basketball team, and if you have a healthy Derrick Rose, which I think is a huge if, you have the best team pretty easily, I think, right now in the Eastern Conference.
The Bulls under head coach Tom Thibodeau displayed incredible chemistry and team spirit even in Rose's absence. Led by Joakim Noah, Luol Deng, and surprisingly, a guard who the Bulls picked 30th overall in 2011. They finished the regular season 45-37 and upset the Brooklyn Nets in the first round of the playoffs. However, they still couldn't overcome LeBron and the Miami Heat in the second round. While the team's gritty performance was admirable, the shadow of Rose's absence loomed large. Questions about his ability to return to his MVP form began to swirl.
How tough was it sitting out a whole season?
It was very hard, very difficult, knowing that I love the game so much, been away from basketball.
Derrick Rose finally returned in the 2014 season, and the city of Chicago held its breath with every drive, jump, and cut. Initially, there were glimpses of his old self, explosive drives to the basket, the finishes, and flashes of MVP level play. But the rust was evident, and his game wasn't as consistent as it had been. And then, just 10 games into the season, tragedy struck again.
Some unfortunate news out of Chicago this morning. Derrick Rose will miss the rest of the season after undergoing surgery this morning to repair a torn meniscus in his right knee. Rose missed all of last season after tearing the ACL in his left knee during the playoffs in 2012. You guys remember that? Can't catch a break, can he, Stephen A? Let me ask you this. Are you worried about his future?
Yes, I am.
Rose tore the meniscus in his right knee during a game against the Portland Trail Blazers. Once more, he was ruled out for the season. The hope that his career would return to his previous heights began to fade. The Bulls, again rallying behind Thibodeau's defense-first philosophy, managed a 48-34 record and another playoff berth. But without Rose, their ceiling was limited, and they were eliminated in the first round by the Washington Wizards. The next season marked yet another attempt at redemption. Rose returned with tempered expectations, and the Bulls added Pau Gasol in free agency, providing the team with another all-star caliber player. Rose, while no longer the explosive force he once was, showed flashes of brilliance. He played 51 games, averaging 17 points per game. The playoffs brought one of Rose's most memorable moments since his MVP season. In Game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against LeBron and the Cavs, he did this.
Looking, finds Rose. Rose trying to get open, fires away. Bang! It's over!
And it was also one of the best memes of the year.
I know. It's cool because that moment for me, it really represents like who is the crowd going crazy, where everybody's excited around him and he's the only one who's just like stoic face. I mean, it's probably one of the biggest shots in Bulls history, and just to be able to be calm and collected like that in that moment, not only hitting a crazy shot, but like keeping your composure. I would have not been like that.
But the joy was short-lived. The Cavaliers won the series in 6, and the Bulls' championship aspirations were once again extinguished.
Cleveland Cavaliers are back in the conference finals.
By the time the league became the Warriors vs. Cavs show, the Derrick Rose era in Chicago was nearing its end. The team's core had begun to unravel. Tom Thibodeau fired, and Jimmy Butler emerged as the team's new focal point. Rose, battling lingering injuries and declining athleticism, was no longer the player he once was. He averaged 16 points per game, but struggled with consistency, and the media wasn't giving him a break.
So the only way for him to get it together and to learn the difference between being injured and being hurt and really working his way through it is to go out there with nicks and knacks. Go out there not feeling necessarily 100% and just ball, because Derrick Rose is a superstar when healthy. But you got to play through some things because everything can't be utopia over an 82-game stretch and beyond in this league. It's just unheard of.
Interestingly enough, the Bulls missed the playoffs for the first time since Rose's rookie year. And that's crazy to say out loud. Remember, at this point, Rose is only 27. Most players are entering the playoffs around this age, not leaving the playoffs. The franchise, recognizing the need for a rebuild, traded Rose to the New York Knicks in the summer of 16.
You lying. Yeah.
Okay, or you
just in awe.
Some may call Rose's time in Chicago bittersweet, but I think the way that they broke up made the situation a whole lot worse. D-Rose would make it for nearly a decade more in the league. He would have more solid seasons.
Every stat you see is his best since before he hurt his knee the first time. And then you just look at that. I mean, you don't even need the stats.
Right?
6 man of the year.
Good games.
Wiggins, Rose three-pointer, got it!
And even amazing ones.
Rose, who had 19 in the third quarter. Rose gets inside, puts up a tough shot.
But he would never come close to replicating the time in Chicago. I waited too long for this. Now we need to talk about Garpax. Let's take it back a bit. The Garpax era started more than decently. John Paxson, a Chicago hero after hitting a championship-winning shot in 1993, transitioned from player to local commentator to executive. Fans welcomed the move, seeing Paxson as someone who got it. A guy who'd understand Chicago's hunger for a new dynasty. Then there was Gar Forman, the less glamorous half of the duo. Starting as a scout, Forman worked his way up to general manager, bringing a reputation for spotting talent and working the margins. At first, the partnership seemed ideal. Paxson was the face, the guy with the championship pedigree, while Forman handled the nitty-gritty. Together, they were supposed to rebuild the Bulls after the post-Jordan wilderness years. And let's give credit where credit's due. Garpax oversaw one of the most exciting periods in Bulls history since Jordan's retirement. D. Rose was the centerpiece, but the team's success was also about smart roster building. The additions of Noah, Taj Gibson, and Boozer created a gritty, defensive-minded squad that embodied the toughness that represents Chicago. Hiring Thibodeau in 2010 seemed like the cherry on top. Tibbs' obsessive attention to detail and defensive schemes turned the Bulls into contenders overnight. Chicago had swagger again, and for a moment it felt like the dynasty's drought was over, but cracks were already forming. Thibodeau's no-response approach clashed with Garpax almost immediately. Tibbs wanted to get every drop of effort out of his players, often at the expense of their health. Noah, Deng, and Rose racked up massive minutes, leading to inevitable breakdowns. Garpax, watching from their cushy offices, grew frustrated, and rumors started leaking. Garpax wanted Thibodeau to ease up, maybe, just maybe, prioritize long-term health over short-term wins. But Thibodeau refused. He wasn't about to let executives meddle with his rotations or game plans. And tension simmered for years until it boiled over.
Tom Thibodeau took the Chicago Bulls to the playoffs 5 times in his 5 seasons as head coach. But under Thibodeau, the Bulls never made it to the top, and Chicago was done waiting. The Bulls fired Thibodeau on Thursday, parting ways with the strong-willed coach, saying a change was needed despite helping bring the team undeniable success. The 2010-2011 NBA Coach of the Year had a 647 win percentage in the regular season for Chicago, and that was with his star point guard Derrick Rose playing only 181 of 394 games due to injury. During that time, Thibodeau's team also thrived defensively, ranking first in the league in points per game and field goal percentage. But despite earlier success, the Bulls were eliminated by the injury-plagued Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference semifinals, which sources say didn't go over well with the management, including Bulls general manager and vice president, who reportedly already had their gripes with Thibodeau. And after the news broke, President Obama, who's a well-known Bulls fan, took to Twitter saying, quote, "I love Tibbs and I think he did a great job. Sorry to see him go, but I expect he'll be snatched up soon by another team."
By the time Tibbs was fired in 2015, both sides were airing their dirty laundry in public, with Garpax releasing a statement blaming Thibodeau for poor communication and a lack of trust, a firing that marked the beginning of the end for Garpax. After firing Thibodeau, Garpax made what they framed as a forward-thinking hire, Fred Hoiberg.
Back to the action here on Hangout. Freddie Hoiberg, the mayor. That's his nickname in case you didn't know. And why? Because while he was playing in Iowa State, people in Iowa were writing his name in the mayoral election, write-in ballots. That's how bad of a baller he was.
Nicknamed the mayor for a successful stint at Iowa State, Hoiberg was supposed to bring a modern, high-octane offense to Chicago.
For me, I understand this league, playing 10 years and working in the front office for 4. I know what this league's all about, and that's the guys. And I'm here to do everything I can to support them and work with them and hopefully bring this group to where we're competing for a world championship.
But from the start, it was clear he wasn't ready for the NBA grind. His laid-back demeanor clashed with the high-pressure environment, and he struggled to command respect in the locker room. Enter the Big Three experiment: Jimmy Butler, Dwayne Wade, and Rajon Rondo. On paper, it sounded, interesting. In reality, though, it was a disaster. Rondo clashed with Wade, Butler clashed with everyone, and Hoiberg couldn't control the egos in the room. The team barely made it into the playoffs, only to get bounced in the first round after blowing a 2-0 series lead.
That Chicago team you brought up, Jimmy has said to me before, he's like, if Rondo doesn't get hurt that series, we beat Boston. You guys were the 8 seed, they were the 1 seed.
Yeah.
You guys ended up going up 2-0, ended up losing 4-2 in that series. But that team in particular was always an interesting team to me. I think you guys were 500 that year in the regular season.
Yeah.
41 and 41. It was you, D Wade, Jimmy,
and a bunch of young guys.
Yeah. Why wasn't that team a little bit better?
The chemistry, it wasn't there.
Really?
Like I mentioned earlier, Jimmy and D Wade, they kind of were, on their own as far as, I guess, even in practice, even off the court. Which, like again, every team is differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there wasn't really a connect, between the old guys and the young. And that was why it was so much friction throughout the year.
Okay, by this point, fans were done. The Fire Garpax chants started echoing throughout the United Center, and fans wanted new players and new leadership. But the real blow came in 2017, when the Bulls traded Jimmy Butler to the Minnesota Timberwolves. In exchange for Butler, the Bulls received Zach LaVine, who was recovering from an ACL tear, Chris Dunn, who had disappointed as a rookie, and Lauri Markkanen, a promising but unproven prospect. The return screamed future potential, but it was clear that Garpax had no real plan for turning potential into results.
Jimmy Butler is the heart of your team. He's now gone. All right, but look, it's never easy when you start over. You got to trade your best asset. So they trade LaVine. Forget about how he fits with Rondo and all that. The next move is Rondo gets bought out. He can get rid of $10 million of his money, and he's gone. You get a young replacement. Now, what do you do with Markkanen? You bring him in. I'm even going to say that Dwayne Wade now likely is a buyout candidate. They're going to give him most of this money, let him go somewhere else because they're starting over, and they bring in Markkanen, not in the position, but at least into the roster. So get in there, Laurie. Come on, you can do it. Come on into the – he doesn't even want to come. Now what are we at? They have cap room, $29 million in space. I'll take Lopez out of there and put in the cap room. This is the new look of the Bulls.
The post-Butler rebuild was supposed to be the start of something new. Garpax sold fans on the promise of a young core led by LaVine, Markkanen, and Dunn, but it didn't take too long for the cracks to appear. Dunn struggled with consistency and injuries, failing to develop into the two-way point guard the Bulls needed. Markkanen showed flashes, but never reached his potential, due to injuries and a lack of a defined role. And while LaVine evolved into a dynamic scorer, his defensive lapses and lack of leadership raised questions about his ability to be the face of a franchise. Off the court, the front office decisions were just as confusing. The Jabari Parker signing in 2018 was definitely a head-scratcher from the start. Brought in on a $40 million deal, Parker famously declared, "They don't pay players to play defense," and then proceeded to confirm his own statement with his lackluster effort on that end of the court. By midseason, Parker was benched, and the Bulls were openly tanking. Tanking, however, didn't bring much reward. The Bulls consistently found themselves stuck in the NBA's version of purgatory. Bad enough to miss the playoffs, but not bad enough to secure top draft picks. Their lottery luck never improved, and the players they did select were often underwhelmed. By the 2010s, the relationship between Garpax and Bulls fans had reached a breaking point.
I got to put the team first, but And, it's just the situation we're in right now.
The duo had become the face of mediocrity, and their inability to adapt to the modern NBA was glaringly obvious. The promotion of Jim Boylen to head coach in 2018 was probably the final nail in their coffin.
There has been a lot of talk of fighting around the Bulls this month. Really, ever since the team fired coach Fred Hoiberg for Jim Boylen, that has been the operative word. Bulls management saying the team needs a more collective fight. Boylen saying how much he loves players who are fighters. And then, of course, the stream of news stories of infighting within the team. Pro tip, you never want the word mutiny in the headlines about your franchise.
Boylen, with his old school approach and abrasive personality, quickly alienated players and fans alike. His tactics, including scheduling grueling practices after back-to-back games and calling unnecessary timeouts when the Bulls clearly lost, made him a laughingstock. Under his coaching, the Bulls suffered the worst loss in franchise history, losing by 56 points to the Boston Celtics. After the game, Boylen simply said that he was disappointed, but not discouraged, which didn't sound all that truthful. Meanwhile, other teams around the league were making moves, hiring innovative coaches and building championship contenders. The Bulls, under Gar-Pax, were stuck in a time warp, clinging to the outdated philosophies and refusing to admit to their mistakes.
There's a Fire Gar-Pax billboard, a full-on billboard in Chicago right now, clearly aimed at General Manager Gar Forman and Vice President of Basketball Operations John Paxson and their recent decisions. Do they deserve this kind of treatment?
It's the culture of sports, and at this point they do. If you look at their team from the overall standpoint of regression, it has happened since the final year of Thibodeau and when they decided they were going to part ways with him. He didn't just leave, he upgraded. He went and got a bigger deal in Minnesota.
And got more responsibility.
And he lured your best player away from your roster in Jimmy Butler. And so when you're not winning in an Eastern Conference and a lot of these moves have gone awry, yes, they do have some young talent that I think has promise. You know how I feel about Zach LaVine.
Of course.
I do understand the frustration of the fans, and they have that right.
Finally, in 2020, the Reinsdorf family finally made the decision fans had been begging for. Gar Forman was fired, and Paxson was reassigned to an adversary role. It was the end of an era, one that had started with so much promise, but ended in disappointment and frustration. But the fans were finally happy. In their place came Arturas Karnisovas, the highly respected former Denver Nuggets executive, and Mark Eversley, the first black GM in Bulls history. The new leadership promised a fresh direction for a franchise stuck in neutral. And the initial signs were encouraging. One of Karnisovas' first moves was hiring Billy Donovan, a proven NBA coach with success in Oklahoma City. Karnisovas and Eversley wasted little time retooling the roster. The first major shakeup came in March 2021 when they traded for All-Star center Nikola Vucevic.
This is big time because, see, Vucevic can play. That's number one. Number two, you kept Zach LaVine. Marketing hasn't gone anywhere yet. I like his promise. And so when you look at that, the fact that Billy Donovan's your coach and some of the things that you're doing there, clearly the Bulls are trying to make some noise in terms of upgrading their roster. Gar Forman, John Paxson, they struggled a lot in the latter years before they departed. The bottom line is what you're looking at right now is a Chicago Bulls team that has put everybody on notice that we're trying to do.
The deal cost the Bulls 2 first-round picks and their young center Wendell Carter Jr. But it was a statement of intent. Vucevic, a skilled offensive big man, was brought in to form a 1-2 punch with Zach LaVine, who had emerged as one of the league's most dynamic scorers at that time. The following offseason, once again, the Bulls went all in. They started with the departure of Lauri Markkanen, who was sent to Cleveland after an inconsistent tenure in Chicago. They signed DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, and Alex Caruso, addressing long-standing needs for playmaking, perimeter defense, and leadership. DeRozan in particular was viewed skeptically by analysts at the time. Many questioned whether his mid-range game could work in a league increasingly dominated by three-point shooting. But Karnisovas believed in DeRozan's fit and leadership qualities, and the move would prove to be a masterstroke.
Chicago's my sleeper team. I thought out of all the teams in the NBA, they had the best offseason. I told Mike Wilbon, the great Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornhauser, shout out to those guys for 20 years on the PTI, best show on ESPN, awesome job. And they asked me that I have a sleeper. I said, Chicago Bulls. I do. I think the Chicago I think they're gonna be there all year.
The revamped Bulls hit the ground running, And for the first time in years, the team wasn't just competitive, but it was actually kind of fun to watch. DeRozan silenced any doubter with a career renaissance, stringing together MVP caliber performances, and his back-to-back buzzer beaters on consecutive nights in December became instant classics, cementing his place as a fan favorite. Lonzo, meanwhile, brought a much-needed sense of order to the Bulls' offense. His playmaking, three-point shooting, and elite perimeter defense transformed the team on both ends of the court. Oh yeah, and Alex Caruso. With his hustle and defensive tenacity, he became a cult hero in Chicago, while Zach LaVine continued to light up the scoreboard. By the All-Star break, the Bulls were sitting atop the Eastern Conference.
What makes this team so tough to play against?
Well, as Zach alluded to, I think it's their defensive pressure up front. Adding Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso has been great for them. Alex Caruso, to me, is one of the most underrated free agency additions this past offseason. The Lakers miss him, and he's been tremendous for the Bulls. He doesn't have to score to impact a game. He's so disruptive on defense, and he's been absolutely great for them.
The team finally had an identity again. A gritty, hard-nosed squad that thrived in close games and played with a chip on its shoulder. But just as optimism reached its peak, the injury curse returned to haunt the Bulls. Lonzo Ball suffered a knee injury in January that would ultimately end his season and cast a doubt over his future. Caruso missed a lot of time after fracturing his wrist from this play.
Moment, then DeSumu's got it, hits the trailer, Caruso in a hard foul.
And as more injuries piled up, the Bulls' once vaunted defense crumbled. The second half of the season exposed the team's flaws. They struggled against elite competition, the lack of depth became obvious, and the reliance on DeRozan's heroics was definitely unsustainable. By the time the playoffs rolled around, the Bulls limped in as the 6th seed, a far cry from their midseason dominance.
The trouble with them is, obviously they've had really strong performances in crunch time, as you're saying. DeMar DeRozan, just great at manufacturing shots in those situations this season. But more broadly, when they've played against good teams, it just hasn't quite been there. And some of that is the injury stuff. It's going, not just one injury, but 2 and 3 spots down on the depth chart where guys are just being asked to do a little bit too much. And so I don't know how much of it is that and how much of it is something endemic to who they are as a team and how they defend. And, Zach LaVine being pretty much, he's going to be banged up for the rest of the season. He's kind of waiting to deal with his stuff in the offseason injury-wise. Not great. But against the top 10 point differential teams this season, they are 6-14. They're okay on offense, 9th, which is about where they are usually, 26th on defense in those games. That really worries me. And I know
in the first round, they faced the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks. After a shocking Game 2 victory led by DeRozan's 41 points, the series quickly turned lopsided. The Bucks' size and experience overwhelmed the Bulls, who lost the series in 5 games. It was definitely a disappointing end to a season that had promised so much more. The 2022 offseason brought more questions than answers, especially regarding Lonzo Ball's health. Lonzo underwent surgery to address lingering issues with his knee, but reports suggested his recovery was slower than expected. And without Ball, the Bulls struggled to replicate that fast-paced, cohesive play that made them so dangerous when fully healthy. But despite those concerns, the front office opted to double down on the current core. They re-signed Zach LaVine to a 5-year, $250 million max contract, signaling their belief in him as the face of the franchise. However, they made few game-changing roster upgrades, a decision that drew criticism from fans and analysts alike. The 2023 season was a frustrating one. While DeRozan and LaVine continued to produce offensively, the team lacked consistency and identity. Without Lonzo Ball to orchestrate the offense, the Bulls leaned heavily on isolation plays and mid-range scoring, an approach that felt increasingly outdated in the modern NBA. The team's defense, while still solid thanks to Caruso and Javonte Green, couldn't compensate for their offensive struggles. And once again, the Bulls found themselves stuck in the middle of the pack, hovering around 500 and battling for a spot in the play-in tournament. As the 2023 offseason approached, the Bulls faced a familiar dilemma: blow it up or double down. With Nikola Vucevic's contract expiring and DeMar DeRozan entering the final year of his deal, the team had to decide whether to rebuild or continue chasing playoff relevance. It was a decision fraught with risk, especially with Lonzo Ball's future still uncertain. For fans, it felt like deja vu. The Bulls had been here before, staring down a critical juncture with no clear path forward. But this time, the question wasn't just about roster construction, but about identity. What kind of team did the Bulls want to be? And more importantly, what kind of team could they realistically become? The Bulls once again found themselves stuck in the middle of the pack, with a play-in exit or a first-round playoff elimination looking likely. While the team made incremental progress in areas like playmaking and defense, they remained hampered by poor three-point shooting and a lack of offensive creativity. By 2025, the team finally began what appeared to be a rebuild, though in typical Bulls fashion, it left fans scratching their heads. The first domino to fall was sending Alex Caruso to the Thunder in exchange for Josh Giddey. Then came the DeMar DeRozan sign and trade with Sacramento and San Antonio, which basically netted Chicago nothing in return. LaVine was shipped off to Sacramento as well shortly after. With Lonzo Ball and Nikola Vucevic still on the roster, it's a partial dismantling of their former core. But what's left is an oddly guard-heavy roster with no clear direction. Are they rebuilding around their current pieces, or is another shakeup coming? At this point, guys, your guess is as good as mine.
My motivation is this ghost I'm chasing. The ghost played in Chicago. What he did was unbelievable, and I watched it unfold. I looked up to him so much.
The day after Bron and the Cavs performed the most impressive comeback in NBA history, Jordan gave his blessings for the last dance. Unfortunately, it seems there's no winning against Mike. For the Bulls, it's a dual-edged sword. That era is their greatest pride and their heaviest burden. Every move the franchise makes seems to be filtered through a lens of comparison. Every player hailed as the next Jordan crumbles under the weight of expectation. I'd say Derrick Rose came the closest. His meteoric rise briefly reignited hope before injuries shattered the dream. For Chicago fans, the shadow is a comfort and a curse. It reminds them of the glory days, but also demands an impossible standard. How do you follow perfection? How do you build something new when the old is still so present? The Bulls, despite brief flashes of promise, have never found a clear answer. I think the real question is, how long will the Bulls compete with Jordan's ghost? And how long will the shadow he casts dominate the city of Chicago and the league at large? Maybe it's not something to be outrun or overcome, but simply lived with. A permanent testament to greatness, as enduring and untouchable as the game itself.